So we call to order the Finance Committee meeting for Monday, June 24th. And among business items, the first item is the internal control audit status. Jim, help me out. Specifically, what does internal control audit mean? What's that?
Well, we laid out 3 different initiatives about 3 months ago.
Yes.
One was a bridge toll calculation and deposits and
Yeah.
the internal controls of all those deposits. The second one was an inventory or fuel inventory
Yes.
audit that we had not done.
Mhm.
Steve does regularly, does these particular tanks. And we hadn't, since Volo left last summer, we hadn't done anything particularly at the airport. Over a couple of airport managers now.
Sure.
So we had completed the bridge toll
Mhm.
calculations. We have completed the inventory, the first run of the fuel inventories. And up next is the industrial park leases.
Yep.
The lease income and lease documents. So what I'm gonna suggest is that we consider in September or October doing another round of fuel inventory calculations.
Is there, why do you suggest that? Was there an issue?
They had some trouble balancing up to the gallons of fuel that were left in the inventory. The examples that I recall citing, and Stephanie and Faria can pipe in, was that we miscalculated the reading on the stick the first time around.
Yes.
And I don't know the background of that. But I think when we ended up not having all of the purchase deliveries in the audit. So, there was a lot of back and forth with Stephanie and Faria trying to pin those items down.
The
Because
beginning inventory wasn't accurate?
We're getting close. The first that Jim mentioned, our tanks are a little bit different than the tanks here. And so when we read the stick, the folks here used the measurements for these tanks.
The wrong calibration,
And the wrong calibration. So that was
easily done.
easily fixed. We're still, I'll be honest with you, we still have some problems, and we're gonna continue to have some problems because until March or the 1st of April of 2018, we have no records of fuel because Volo took everything. And there are some discrepancies right now that I'm working through with Allegiant to try and get that straightened out. But we have, at the airport, not only our unleaded and our diesel that everyone uses, but we have the Jet A and we have the 100 low lead.
Right.
And 100 low lead's pretty simple, but the Jet A, we have to do 2 audits a month. Well, I shouldn't say 2 audits a month. 2 audits for 2 different airlines every month. They do them differently. And so I have to audit the fuel differently. Allegiant requires it twice a month. SkyWest would like it once a week. And so I'm working on getting those reports together and keeping it correct. And because we only have 1 fuel tank, we have to mix the loads. And so it's a balancing act, who we order the fuel under. The fuel's paid for by the airlines, but we have to be sure that we're not ordering too much on somebody, on one airline's bill. And we have to be very careful with that. So it's taking some time, especially with SkyWest right now. it's a learning curve because they do things completely differently than Allegiant, but it's working.
Stephanie, do you know, are we using the automated gauge on the Jet A tank?
We do use the automated gauge, we also do a stick, to be sure.
Thank you.
The automated gauge get calibrated very often.
It has to be calibrated annually, those calibrations are in August.
Okay, so you're certified or whatever they.
Correct.
Yeah.
Oh, no, both Allegiant and SkyWest do fuel, farm and fuel truck audits annually, and they check to see that all our paperwork's in order.
Good.
Satisfies me on the internal control audits.
Okay.
Any other questions on that, gentlemen? Let's look at the May 2019 financials. When did
Okay,
you
I sent
think-
your packets to you
Yep.
on Friday.
I've gone over the highlights.
And that's what I'll do, pretty quickly. On the bridge traffic is down,
Yeah,
and it's trending down over the last several months, continues to be down. So I think the impact that has on us is, we projected about $575,000 annually.
mhm,
So a couple percentage points off from that, from the bridge traffic being down. Probably safe to say that $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 through, over the course of a full year,
mhm,
that will impact that number if those traffic volumes continue to be downward trending.
yeah,
However, the revenues, by virtue of a full month of the toll increase, jumped way up
yeah,
for the month of May. And if you look at the financial statement, it's almost equal with budget, even though we were down overall 5%.
mhm,
And the commercial traffic is the one that's down. Not so much, not as much on the auto side, but, and they're more lucrative crossings financially.
mhm,
So to put some numbers with that, Bridge and Port is down 8.75%, Thousand Islands is down 7%, Seaway is down 10%, just to kind of band it.
Well, I was interested that after a recent meeting that we had where bridge traffic was discussed, that I think there was a story in the Watertown Daily Times that did a lot of checking with border crossings and found that trend across many crossings.
Okay. Yeah, we have a report that includes probably 15 border crossings that we participate with as a public authority, and the trends are downward trends more recently.
Is it, do you think because of the exchange or something else?
That's one theory.
Exchange and trade issues.
I think the less, or the larger the currency exchange, the less people travel. That's a theory that I've heard.
Mhm.
Yeah, but the exchange rate has been one-sided for quite a while now.
It's been quite
72
stable.
cents.
I'd say.
Yeah, it's running,
So it's gotta be
between
something
70 and
more than
75
that.
cents pretty consistently.
Mhm. I think any explanations that I can come up with would just be guesses and not particularly useful.
Okay, the industrial park comments are, you folks have heard me discuss the new solar farm coming on board a few months back. The only material difference is more of a calculation difference for us, in that National Grid has a meter reading every month and gives us kilowatt hours. the solar farm distributes one bill for the whole OBPA operation that doesn't distinguish what the kilowatt hours on a per meter basis. So we have to do a series of spreadsheets to get back what most of the industrial park tenants do is pay a pass-through on the utilities. So the electric bill comes in and it's all based on kilowatt hours, so we have to break it down into dollars and cents. Not that complicated, a little tough getting the first one going. I've got one inquiry thus far because we're just sending the bills out to the tenants. So I guess I would say stay tuned. I don't think there'll be a lot of questions. You know, methodology I used was pretty simple. I took 3 months of weighted average national grid bills and applied that to the solar farm,
Yeah.
first couple solar farm bills. Now, whether that's a long enough track record, usually when you look at the individual locations, the kilowatt hours stay roughly very similar. And I don't know if there's heavier swings, different swings in the winter months versus the summer months. Obviously, then, once the air conditioning kicks in, it tends to kick up the electric bill.
Well, it sounds as if that is something that, if it lasted for years, could get out of whack.
Yeah.
I think we need to have an offline conversation about that, because each national grid bill shows the number of kilowatt hours that went through it. You know, we need to make sure that we're billing for what actually went, national grid, of course, for using the meter, that portion needs to be charged to them. But also, we need to make sure that there's accuracy in the electrons that actually went through the meter and the portion that they're being charged to the overall solar farm bill.
Was it each tenant metered, so we know exactly how much they use? Don't we have that?
If they have a large percentage of the building, generally they're on their own meter, but if you've got 5 or 6 clients in one building, it's a shared metering situation. So it bears some extra scrutiny to make sure that it's being done and done correctly, particularly as it's just started.
Now, if National Grid's meter, they automatically read that at their end. But do we have to send somebody out to read that periodically?
Now, we see that on the bill, on the national grid bill that comes in. It has
So we're comparing
it has
that,
the meter charge, and it also has the number of kilowatt hours that went through the meter. But the billing on the national grid bill for the kilowatt hour charge now is 0, where there used to be a charge in there.
Sure.
Because the electricity itself now comes from the solar farm project.
Because you'd be billed from that, right?
Right.
And that could be a methodology that we could use. We could actually take the actual kilowatt hours and apply it to the solar farm charge per kilowatt hour.
but it's
Um,
mostly passed through anyways, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a dollar for
Yes.
dollar pass-through.
Well, sounds to me like a question of methodology, and I'm sure that we'll be interested to hear as it progresses.
Anne Marie, let's add that as a item for the next committee meeting, please.
So down at the airport, we had, obviously, May was the first full month of SkyWest flights. May's also the first month where the Allegiant flights really start dropping off, so areas like parking fees dropped down pretty considerably. And the PFC charges were not as high as they will be once Allegiant and SkyWest are going what I would call full bore. So otherwise, a good month in May for the airport as far as the revenues go. There were a lot of general aviation flights coming in, attending the local graduations. Pretty hectic, pretty busy month, the month of May, and the weather wasn't that great. But all in all, the SkyWest flights, I think, had more passengers than was originally projected already in the first month. So hopefully that's a trend that'll also continue. And remember that, you know, comparing SkyWest revenues to what we had with Cape Air, should be $200,000 to $250,000 additional revenue over the course of the year. So Port of Ogdensburg was busy in May with ships for the wind turbine project. The only problem looking at the financial statements is the expenses have gotten here faster than the revenues. Which is an odd thing, but it's right in the middle of the process right now, so. I have not yet seen the OMLC charges for the wind turbine project, but that may be the only expense we haven't seen up to this point.
But everything's been billed to the shipping line and the windmill company and everything.
The shipping lines have all been billed. I don't know of anything that's been billed to the wind turbine company, which is General Electric, I believe. So we haven't seen it up here, and it usually has to come through finance to be billed. So I think they're in the middle of calculating all of that. So we've received approximately 70,000, which is a little less than 10% of the overall estimated project. Now, we billed for just about half. There's two outstanding bills that are due to come in, one of them any day now, and then another one in about 2 weeks. And any other charges, I've got to circle back with Adam to verify where they are in the process for calculating the charges. So budget variances continue to be, airport is very seasonal. It jumps up and down. So I think the budget distribution's in fairly good shape at the airport, but it tends to, the reason it jumped around this year a little bit more than anticipated was Allegiant changed the flight schedules predominantly around the Tampa flights. They started later and they finished earlier. Is that right?
Does that mean that they reduced the
Saying it
number
that
of
way?
flights total over the years?
I don't think
That's
they reduced the
fair.
number of flights in total, but we budgeted for them to fly through July,
Mhm.
or June and July, and then they don't fly in August, but they stopped the Tampa flights early in May
Mhm.
or late in April.
Mhm.
So they're huddling, and every year they come out with a schedule, and they're going to promote their schedule
Mhm.
that provides the biggest bang for the dollar for them, so.
So they did end the Tampa flight almost 2 months early versus prior year.
Mhm.
But prior year flight had little to no customers in the last month of the service.
Yeah.
In addition, they also started up the third section of the Orlando flight that is still running through the summer. So there's a mixed bag in there.
Mhm. Well, it seems to me as if it's volatile enough so that I think it's not anything to worry about if there's a variation on a single month. Maybe over a quarter or maybe even over a 6-month period, if we had a variation, we really ought to pay attention to it, but from month to month, not so.
None of it changes the continuing need to add another airline in
Yes,
one place.
yep.
So, marine terminal revenues, the wind turbine project still remains a difficult task to figure out how to distribute the budget dollars. So, I budgeted most of the revenues and then the projected expenses over 5 months. Some of the expenses are coming in more fast and furious than that, so there's expense variances showing us to be over budget, and then the revenue variances, because we don't have some of the charges in yet, are well under budget
Mhm.
for the first couple of months. So I think they're gonna still fluctuate and be a variable that'll be difficult to pinpoint.
Mhm.
On the expense side, the legal fee expenses are double and triple what we've got in the budget, and difficult to predict. They're doing a lot of work right now, but we're seeing bills of over $10,000 on an almost monthly basis, and we don't have that much budgeted. We have $80,000 budgeted. So that's gonna be a problem spot.
Isn't that the legal fees, Jim?
Pardon me?
Legal?
Legal fees, yeah.
Why is that different than what we had anticipated?
Right. We're using them a lot more.
Is that Capello or the?
No,
Wa-
Frank's bills aren't that
Waters?
large. I think the large expectation with Frank's bills will come when we get ready to close the
Yeah.
border station
Right.
corporation.
Mhm.
And on the annexation request too, that's where that's gonna also hit. We've had.
Is that where this increase, you're anticipating that, or are we already seeing it increase?
Not with the, are you talking about the border station
No,
corporation?
overall legal fees.
We are already seeing the legal fees.
I don't,
Like a separate schedule created by firm, and that way we can talk about in an executive session about what the items are.
Okay, yeah.
Some of the items that come to mind for big movers there, we had, it was $11,000 invoice associated with the taxation issues, fuel taxation issues at the airport, and getting that straightened out so we know what to bill for and what we don't. There were some grant-related issues, but that was on the strategic as opposed to the Volatus side of things. There's the Hertz rental agreement where he needed to have some work done there. That's on today's agenda. Frank couldn't do it for us because Frank also represents one of the parties on the other side on the card rental.
Sure.
So,
mhm. Okay.
and so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. That's, there should be an older version on that, on the CFO drive. So that way you can pull it up and update it.
So moving over to the balance sheet, no real big surprises other than understanding that some of the prior month line items did not include the audit adjustments. So there were numbers that are a little bit skewed and they'll even out over the course of the next month. And I do have the audit line items in there this month, whereas I didn't last month. So there would be some adjustments to those line items. But balance sheet, pretty straightforward. We had a good month of collections in the grants, which allowed us to help with the accounts payable. The accounts payable went down 48,000 since the end of the fiscal year, 2019.
And just, I'm sorry, just so I'm reading this right, current year consolidated is actually what? The month of,
Month of May.
just May,
Yep,
prior month is April,
yep,
then you have your difference, and of course, year to date on the other side, right?
right.
Okay.
So we don't compare or 1 year ago, we compare to audit. So, and that grows over the course of
Yep.
7 months. So the income statement's pretty flat out. There is starting to be some activity for the bridge construction grants that are out there. There's two grants that'll be moving forward. We're just starting to see the preliminary engineering bills. Those grants are gonna be a little more difficult to administer because we have to front that money. And we don't have a lot of funds to front that money, and we don't have access to capital. So those are gonna be difficult items. In addition to the back end of those have a couple $100,000 or $170,000 if I remember correctly. I haven't seen the most current numbers, but we're gonna struggle to find that $170,000 at the back end of those things.
Didn't we adjust everything on the border station? Here it looks like we haven't. Did we adjust that upward for the revenue?
Did we adjust it for the revenue for this fiscal year?
Yes.
We've adjusted it right to the grant agreement that we get for rent every month, which is the $90,527. If you were to multiply that times 12, you would end up close to our budget number.
So we did adjust, I thought we had adjusted it in the budget.
Yeah, we have.
Okay, all right.
So your review of the financial statements, any questions pop out? Not related to the highlights pages that I've just gone over?
Yeah, in the income statement, industrial park. In the revenue, industrial park rental income is down 20,000 from current budget. Is there any particular reason for that? Is it just the month?
I believe that's the month, but the other thing we have to recall is that we haven't done the accounting changes to move the utility pass-through out of the credit to the expense line and up into the revenue line. And those will be catching up fast and furious.
Okay.
So I need to figure out how to go in and adjust a charge code that's in the computer system.
So that question directly relates to the electrical invoicing that we were talking about.
Some of it does,
earlier.
yes.
Okay.
It's budgeted in the industrial park revenues, and the credits actually get credited to the expense.
Well, it's just that the rental income is down 20,000.
Yeah. And I believe that's
I don't-
all in the utilities.
Okay, 20,000. All right.
utilities are not low by that much.
No,
I wonder if I'm misreading it.
And low by 4,000 maybe?
no, a lot of the income gets posted, well, we do billing for most of it. I think in the industrial park, we do billing for all of it. So I think the utilities, because of the solar farm calculations, are a couple of months back,
Sure.
backlogged.
I just, you know,
Why would that go into, I still don't understand why that would go into rental income.
Yeah,
I don't know, I'm just asking.
And it'd be
Just an
fine to
accounting
modify-
question.
It'd be fine to modify the
It can be,
budget rather
it can
than
be
changing-
credited, if you recall, we had a month, 3 or 4 months ago, where the utility line was a negative line, and that's because the utilities get credited against expense.
so if we don't bill for the cost of utilities, we see that as rental income,
We bill for the cost of the utilities,
but it's put into rental income.
yes.
Okay.
Well, I believe it should. I mean, if it can be argued by any other accountant that it belongs here, and that's where they're gonna put it. And that may happen when my replacement gets here.
Okay.
But it ends up in one spot or the other. It's the same number.
Okay.
Um,
I'm good with that one.
Okay.
I'm not good with the airport.
Do you want to move on then to the airport?
If you're ready to.
Yes, absolutely.
Ready, Steph?
Go ahead.
Airport facility fees. My current actual is at a 0.
That's my doing. We billed the SkyWest rental in June, but it was for May. So I don't have the breakdown yet of how much that rental, there's like 6 different individual charges, and some of those will come through facility fees. I put it all under fuel sales.
Oh, okay, that's higher.
That's why
Fuel sales
that's
and
why
rent,
that's high.
fuel sales and rental income, sorry.
All right,
I got the fuel sale one under the right category. It was the rental income and the facility fees that are kind of skewed.
but the PFC charges, why is that so low from, what was budget? Is that because we just,
That can always be, we book that revenue when we get the check. Sometimes the check gets here on the 2nd of the month, sometimes the check gets here on the 29th or 30th of the month. So if that cash receipt hits in a month prior, then the PFC charges are gonna be way, way low. And then you're gonna see a month where you'll get a check on the 1st or the 2nd of the month, and then you'll also get a check on the 30th of the month. So you'll see
that
2
goes,
times.
I'm sorry, that goes back to what we just said about the fluctuations
Yeah.
in Allegiant, and now with United SkyWest. It's hard, I understand, it's hard monthly because of the way, Allegiant flights are. But I guess so long as over the entire budget, we come out where we think we will,
Yeah,
that
it's-
makes quite a difference.
It's the 12 months that's at issue, not the single month.
Right.
As long as we're not seeing a problem with a particular issue.
Right.
So it's perfectly fine, just ask, is this represent a problem or a timing issue?
I was doing some math the other day because I wanted to know the answer to the question, what does SkyWest mean to us over and above what Cape Air meant to us? And looking at the actual charges on the invoice, using the new one that just went out, SkyWest means an extra $225 versus the former airline, and then the PFC's passenger fare increase, passenger fare charges for SkyWest, assuming the 50% load factor, translates to an extra $25,000. So that kind of puts it in the in the ballpark.
Right. Then the staff of professional fees and contracts is up by 30,000. Actual.
What is that?
I have no idea.
Things like that too,
Yeah, yeah, I just was curious,
There's about 4 or 5 line items that end up in there. I know MAPCO ends up in there with the people that service the parking lot.
is that just high for 1 month because of the way the bill
It's
is?
high for 1 month because of a couple of different reasons. If you recall, when I sent out the accounts, the most recent accounts payable listing lately, we had a couple of checks that were inadvertently voided. One was the Leo check for the city of Ogdensburg. What happens when you void a check is it recreates the invoice and posts another invoice into the system. So we end up, I believe in May, we fixed it in June. We may see part of that difference credited off in June. But what goes into that line item are the law enforcement bills of somewhere between $12,000 and $15,000 a month. The professional fees supplied by the Canadian Marketing Group, which had a 25% increase in this year, so we're just starting to see those bills jump up a slight amount for that. Those are smaller bills. MAPCO is in there.
I also have, I think, $4,500 in there from Volair, should be in there as well.
From who?
Volair,
Who were they?
aviation consulting, the airport data and airport speak that we talked
Okay.
about.